Hi, everybody. Those who don't know me, I'm Sam. I'm part of the VES. I'm the treasurer for the New York section. And welcome to the first of this series, An Evening with Preymaker. I wanted to set up a series of events where we can celebrate the work that's being done in New York, like talk about the industry and kind of share knowledge and kind of grow the community a little bit. But I'm very excited for our first one to have Angus Kneale here from Preymaker.
Thank you, Sam. It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for inviting us. I love being the first one up. You're like the canary in the gold mine. So Preymaker, An Evening with Preymaker. We had to give it a title, so we thought, well, what are the most important things at the moment? Obviously, artistry. I think a lot of us in this room are artists, and that's really dear to my heart, kind of being an artist and making sure that you can keep on being an artist. Being agile, because being able to pivot really quickly, especially with the way technology is moving, is really important. And then obviously the elephant in the room, AI. So let's just take it straight on. Before I really get going, just a little bit about myself. I am the chief creative at a company called Preymaker. It's a small company that specializes in short form visual effects, CGI, animation, a few other things. I'll give you a slide after to tell you. We work closely with mainly advertisers, so some big brands and that doing short form advertising. And I've been in the industry for a long time. So prior to this, I was part of a pretty big studio here in the US. I had a fantastic career there, and this was a really great opportunity for me to kind of reset the button and kind of relook at the world out there and what does visual effects, CGI, storytelling look like going into the future. So Preymaker is about 6 years old. We started 2 weeks before the pandemic, which was quite a time to start. We had a beautiful studio in Soho that we renovated, and we opened our doors. We were like ready for business. And luckily we made it through, which was fantastic. So really excited to kind of still be here and working on work and being supported by our clients. For me, I really work kind of across all breadths of the company. Please join us. And I kind of get involved in everything. I kind of get involved on the technical side. I'm a real tech head. I absolutely love technology. I'm an artist as well, but also I love people. So kind of I get involved in all aspects of the business, kind of helping winning projects. I supervise a lot of shoots. I fly around the world a lot, and I'm on shoots and kind of in there in the trenches with clients, kind of really figuring stuff out. And I love my job. So this is really exciting for me to talk about what we're doing and where we're going. One of the big things at Preymaker that we really try and make people focus on is not staying in your lane. I think more than ever now, that's the most important thing. I think for the last 20 years, people had to specialize, become the best person in a particular field. We're getting to a point now where kind of some of the best ideas are coming from people that are not qualified for those ideas. And that's some of the most exciting work that we're seeing right now. So we really foster a environment where all good ideas are welcome, and people must not stay in their lane. It's like people really kind of need to try and be versatile and cross boundaries in order to be able to execute the projects of moving forward. So here basically, this is in a nutshell kind of what we focus on. Visual effects, I'd probably say, is our bread and butter. This is really what kind of drives a lot of our ability to do other work. We get most of our reputation from visual effects, but we like to innovate a lot as well. So we spend quite a lot of time with real-time engines. We make immersive experiences, gaming. We work a lot with Unreal. We do immersive design. We did the launch for the VW Buzz with Volkswagen. That was multifaceted, billboards everywhere in different environments, huge outdoor, out-of-home experience. Color grading, obviously, is this amazing art form. It just keeps on getting more and more and more attention, and just how powerful it is. So we work on that, as well as original content. So whenever we've got a lull in our schedule, or whenever we've got a new idea, we like to always have a project on the boil, something that we're personally involved in, something that we're kind of either developing ourselves or pushing some form of new technology to help us prepare for the future. So we're doing a lot of different things. These days, we do a lot of consulting. We do a lot of brands, a lot of clients coming to us not knowing how to do something because they're being told that there's a million different ways to do something. And we really help outline about how to approach things, because these days production, it's really quite tricky. I think what I'm going to do is show you the show. Start tutorial. Come in. We've actually got a new show reel that I was hoping. Thank you. We've actually got a new show reel that I was hoping to show you today, but it's not ready yet. So you're going to have to visit our website to go and check it out. It's hopefully soon. Okay, so a little bit more about us. We're remote first. So when we built Preymaker, it was in the early days of the cloud. We knew that it was possible to have an entire studio in the cloud. We just weren't too sure how quickly we could actually get it running. Luckily, this is one of the things that actually saved us during COVID, is we were completely operational and we were completely cloud-based before COVID, which is a stroke of luck or a stroke of genius, depending on how you want to look at it. But yeah, definitely helped us kind of navigate those waters. You know, we don't use any bare metal, so none of our hardware is actually in the office. We don't have any server rooms and things like that, and we can basically connect to it using remote workstation platforms from anywhere in the world. We've got a team of people from Cape Town to London to New York to Los Angeles, and people dotted in and around the world that all collaborate together on our projects. One thing that I'm really proud of is our whole kind of environment is probably 4 times more efficient than energy efficient than bare metal. So we're pretty cost conscious, carbon footprint conscious in terms of making sure that our energy is being used in all right places. Kind of visual effects is not the greenest industry, so we're wanting to try and reduce our footprint. One thing we really focus on is the artist experience. I think a lot of different people in this industry, when you move from place to place, you feel friction when you're working. It's trying to identify those friction points, making sure that the artistry can prevail and not kind of fighting with the technology. So this is something that we're constantly doing, constantly working on the way that people interact, the way that our data interacts, the way that we collaborate. So today, as I was saying, the three things that we're going to be talking about tonight is artistry, agility, and AI. And now we thought that it might be worth to, rather than take on too many projects, is we're actually going to focus in on one project that we did recently for the Super Bowl, because this really kind of covered a lot of bases for us, which was really interesting because it really was a complete tour de force of different techniques and different ways of doing things. And I'm going to go through a lot of them tonight and just talk about how modern production in visual effects in the commercial space and how it's evolving and how we're actually working in this space right now. One of the things that we're before I actually I'm going to show you the spot for those of you that haven't seen it. This is Kinder Bueno.
No bueno. No bueno. Yes. Kinder Bueno.
No bueno.
Yes. Bueno is irresistible.
Get more in here.
Y bueno.
Bueno. Platilito. Zibunji.
No bueno. Were you born yesterday? Of course there's bueno here.
Irresistible chocolate. Wafer. Hazelnut. Yes. Bueno.
So that was a lot of fun too. Thank you. So let's focus on the artistry. So the reason why we're talking about this project is that it really covered a lot of bases. There was live action, obviously the spacemen, the spacesuits. There was virtual production. We actually had a huge virtual production stage that we used mainly to light things in order to kind of light them effectively, not actually use the virtual production stage as final picture. We used miniatures, so the whole asteroid field and the asteroid that the aliens are sitting on was miniatures. Obviously, there's a lot of CGI animation in there, and then obviously AI. So, and I think what's really interesting is just looking at all of these different disciplines and kind of mashing them all together in terms of how it all actually works. So it was interesting because everyone's very aware of things looking too fake, too CG, too artificial. So what better way to go in and actually kind of say, well, the asteroid, rather than building it in CGI, let's make a model. So here, this is up in Toronto. We ended up making a model out of polystyrene. And those two little balls there where the aliens are going to sit, they were probably only about that big. But what was really great is it actually gave us an opportunity to kind of ground something real. And what was beautiful is the DP had moving lights on set. The whole idea was the asteroids were rotating through space. So we had lights in the frame, we had lots of lens flares. We were embracing all the kind of imperfections of filmmaking, all of the things that people have spent years trying to solve. We were like, well, let's try and make the frame as muddy as possible. Let's try and flare the lens. Let's try and, all of these things, which is great. And then obviously we shot HDRIs and then lit our character and put him in there and put him on a CGI rock that hopefully matched the background. But it was really kind of interesting kind of working on this project because there's so many different facets. One of the things that we needed to solve was the black hole. What does a black hole look like? Thank goodness there's a film called Interstellar because they did a fantastic job in terms of that black hole. And that's like the black hole standard. If anyone's been held to black holes, that's where you want to be. So we kind of looked at Interstellar. We're like, that's great if you're a feature and you've got lots of time. We're a 30-second television commercial. So how do we kind of tell that story of scale in a really, really tight storyline. So there's one thing about visual effects is that it attracts people that are super nerdy, like myself. There's people that really like to geek out on all kinds of things, especially space. They're like, I think the entire team knew what gravitational lensing was. They knew all these different terms in terms of what happens in a black hole, the event horizon. It was remarkable. So it was kind of cool working on this. So we were trying to figure out how do you create the black hole itself? We were trying to think, do you do open shader language? Do you so we wrote a custom shader in terms of the way a black hole would work, the way it bends light, and we're very proud of ourselves. We realized that it was completely unwieldy in production. I think we spent a month getting this working, and it was unusable. So then we just went, okay, let's just use a Fresnel shader in action. And then the Fresnel shader was useful. But what was really cool was actually being able to build up this shot using all of these different layers, all these different kind of techniques, all these different shaders that we built, and layering it up into this final sequence that I think looks pretty cool. It's not interstellar, but I think it's pretty fun. The spaceship was another big asset that we worked on. I think the team felt like they were inspired by Interstellar, so we're like, we've got to do a film quality asset. So we ended up making an asset that literally it can probably end up in the next film. So if anyone needs a spaceship, we have a very, very beautiful spaceship that's very well textured and very, very high detailed. When we designed the spaceship, we kind of just used all these references. We used military ships, World War II bombers, and NASA planes in order to kind of come up with the final model. I don't know how many of you know what UDIMs are, but that bottom left-hand corner is the schematic of all the UDIMs. And apparently it's very complicated. Well, the texture artists and that, we're very proud of that. So it hurts my brain looking at how complex that is. Generally, I say if something's too complicated, you're doing it wrong. You need to try and simplify. So yeah, this is a good look at the asset that we really kind of threw the kitchen sink at this. There was so much detail put into this object that we could have filmed it from any angle. And it was really kind of in phenomenal shape. There was obviously the ship visual effects. When we did, we had layers of atmospheric sparks and panels. There was just so much animation being done in this, as well as we were trying to create the spaghettification look of the spaceship. And we've tried so many different things. We tried kind of distorting it. We tried it, pulling it through, doing kind of a kind of distortion lattice over the entire ship. What ended up working was a good old-fashioned dolly zoom. So this is literally a virtual dolly zoom or contra zoom, and it essentially gives the same effect. And it was really fun using these kind of classic cinematic techniques in terms of coming up with something that feels like it gives you the same look. What's interesting here is this frame is a combination of artificial intelligence and animation and CGI compositing. The background was a generated clip that we kind of used in order to, we were trying to visualize what does the black hole look like when you're going through it. And then we came up with this look, used this same image projected on set when we were actually filming the astronauts. So the astronauts were there looking at this black hole. And it was really interesting kind of seeing the lighting on them, seeing the reflections on them, as it really helped kind of ground it all together. We then started remaking the background, and then we realized, well, actually, it's pretty good. Let's just use the AR frame that we made. So what we did is we dressed it up, we added a few more layers on top of it, so we actually used AI in conjunction with traditional visual effects and animation together, which I think was actually quite successful. There's other details that we agonized over. Obviously, control thrusters. This is something that our animator Peter spent a lot of time developing. And for those of you that know physics or the way the spacecraft work, there's these little jets. They're called attitude adjustment jets. And essentially it's used to change the attitude of a spacecraft in terms of how does a spacecraft orientate itself. So this is obviously a spaceship that is out of control. And he was like, well, where would we put these thrusters in order to be able to make this spaceship be able to retain control? So yeah, there's lots of little details like that hidden in here. The aliens were a joy to work with. It was an interesting process. We only had 4 weeks from a locked edit to broadcast date, which is incredibly fast for something of this complexity and something that's just got this many different types of things you've got to deal with. So what we started doing is, even before production started, is we started coming up with concepts, concepting the aliens, concepting how they move. So a lot of the work that we had to do, we actually did up front. Like the second we heard that we had actually won the project, we were like, okay, we just got to go for it. And we started kind of working on these aliens. The aliens were obviously modeled by hand, rigged by hand, animated by hand, with our artists textured by hand. Everything was textured by hand. But what was interesting is the process to get here was accelerated through artificial intelligence. So this is obviously done by an artist. As you can see, it's got an incredible detail where he's gone in and actually detailed all of the objects. But what AI was actually used incredibly well to help us accelerate the process. With traditional animation, you do blocking, as you do, like on the left-hand side. Once you get the blocking right and the layout right, you then go to spline animation. There wasn't enough time to actually kind of do this in a linear fashion. We had to kind of approach this in parallel. So because we only had 4 weeks to do this, we're like, how do we continually keep on refining the animation, the models, the rigs, without actually re-breaking it and coming back to the beginning? It's something that is just really, really tricky to do. So agility is obviously the ability to iterate quickly, to ingest notes. Clients have always good feedback. They're always going to tell you something that you haven't done or you hadn't thought of. And how do you stay as flexible as possible when you're working on these projects? So we were like, how do we come up with a parallel workflow here, so you can actually kind of do all of these different things at once? So traditionally, on the left-hand side is the way most productions have had to work over the last 30 years, 40 years of visual effects. You basically move from one stage to the next, But when you've got 4 weeks, the only way you can actually make that work is when you actually start working, when you overlap things and you have a parallel timeline. So you can start modeling just before you start rigging, just before you start animating. And what that does is it actually improves the quality. So we've realized that by working like this, as you're modeling and as you're rigging, you come up with things that you learn in the rigging process that then affects the modeling, and vice versa down to the animation. And while everything is still live, it's incredibly agile. So we've adopted this pipeline. This is a project. This is one of the projects. I think this is the third or fourth project we've done this way. We're actually using this style of parallel working. This here, I'm going to show you. This is forgot for a second. So rigging. Okay, so one of the things that obviously is quite time consuming is rigging. We're still coming up with the proportions of the aliens in the spot where we didn't know if he needed to be how skinny he was or too short he was. So what our animator and our rigger did is he came up with a really ingenious way of actually doing a data-driven procedural rigging setup. So using large language models, I think it was Claude he ended up used the way of actually kind of being able to change the rig on the fly. Please come in. So this is a good example where an artist, and Peter is actually a traditionally trained animator, but the large language models, things like Claude and Gemini, that are so accessible these days that he himself has actually started picking up coding, and because he understands rigging, animation, and now code, he had actually written a data-driven procedural rigging setup, which was kind of remarkable. And what it allowed us to do was just the kind of quality that you'd normally take just months in itself to build a rig, we were able to do over the course of the project. Now, AI. So the two main components that we used on this project is stable diffusion, image generations, and large language models. Those are the two kind of peers, I'd say. AI is everywhere. You go into LinkedIn, it's just everywhere, and there's a lot of really bad AI that's been forced down our throats. You know, there's the enormous amount of slop out there, and I think there's a lot of concern from artists in terms of displacement. How's this going to change the industry? It's going to put me out of work. And we've decided to actually embrace it because, in our opinion, AI in the hands of a talented person is a superpower. You get an artist to give him AI, he makes him even more powerful. And a coder as well, someone who's a really good coder, allow them to leverage AI, just makes them even better coders. So we see it very much as an accelerator, as a tool that really it makes the whole process better. Ever since we've started using it, we've noticed our quality levels going up and our iterations going up as well. We can actually kind of do more iterations, get higher quality utilizing AI, but this is not displacing artists. This is the same artists utilizing the AI and just getting faster results, and therefore more iterations, therefore higher quality. So we're quite excited about this in terms of using it this way. Obviously, you know, the strengths, it's great for fast ideation and proof of concepts, you know, and it's fantastic for kind of wide exploration of concepts. The quick turnaround times, you know, it means you can hash out a lot of things to get everyone on the same page. Obviously, the one big problem is AI is essentially made up of what's trained on. So it's very difficult to come up with something novel unless you actually kind of come up with your own LoRa and you can essentially kind of train it yourself. Then you can have your own kind of, it's a unique look. There's a very limited understanding of appeal, composition, artistic principles as well. And hallucinations are also kind of, anyone that's worked with it, I'm sure kind of comes up against this all the time, the inconsistent outputs. I was actually just on a call with a client slightly earlier. We're doing some concept art in AI, and it's this thing, it feels like you're in a slot machine. You're kind of pulling, you might get lucky, you might get lucky, you might get lucky. Oh, suddenly you come up with something that's great. But it's a highly frustrating process. But it is also incredibly powerful in the regard of being able to accelerate what we do. One of the things that the AI also lacks is the ability to understand context. It doesn't understand kind of why. So it's very interesting in terms of how the human component is so important. And I think knowing what to create and how to prompt and what you're trying to end up doing is the key. I think that it's not just coming up with a look of something, it's understanding the emotion that you're trying to come across. It's understanding how you're trying to connect. It's understanding the style, look. There's so many different components that go into coming out with something successful in artificial intelligence. Artistic vision really is everything. And it's so important that people have a clear vision of where you want to go. And we found that the more classically trained our artists are in terms of the fundamentals, the basics, color theory, all the basics of design, painting, the more adept they are to actually kind of utilizing AI and coming up with a really, really good end result. It's something that we're in a way kind of not retraining, but reskilling a lot of our people to be able to kind of utilize this new technology in order to be able to accelerate what we're doing. But AI without the artist in order to tell the story and be able to put the vision together, it's nothing. And it really does need the artist in order to be able to pull it together. So this is really an interesting use case. This is, so when we came up with the model, for the design for these characters. Rather than modeling them, we put them through something called meshing. Meshing, I'm sure people know, it comes up with a really kind of pretty basic mesh in terms of geo. But what it allowed us to do was it allowed us to start the whole kind of pipeline that I talked about, the parallel pipeline that allowed us to do the rigging at the same time. And while we were actually kind of, this was literally the first model you can see that we're rigging up. And then as the asset was being updated, we were putting it back into the rig, and everything fell back into place. As long as the proportions and all the basic parts of the character fell into the right places, we were able to kind of utilize this process. Vibe coding, I'm sure, I don't know if you guys know what that is, but vibe coding is when you tell Claude or Gemini what you want the program to do. So it's kind of like coming up, you're not actually programming it yourself, you're describing what the end result is. We actually used vibe coding on this project, and it was a really great way of rebuilding the SDK without actually having to manually going through and doing it, because we didn't actually know whether it was going to work. So the artist vibe coded the process, and once it actually got working, then we actually went and programmed it properly. But vibe coding allows you to really test out a lot of different things. This would have taken months previously to actually come up with something like this. But through vibe coding, you can actually have the artist explain what they're trying to do to the AI, that then in turn give you the tools in order to be able to do it. So the acceleration was just extraordinary in terms of getting to the end result quicker. So this is the result of the vibe coded component that he wrote. It's kind of complicated in terms of what it's trying to do. Is it's trying to kind of maintain the fleshy deformity of the alien. So as the eyebrows are moving together, it makes sure that it deforms in the same place, and you don't get volumes that just disappear. So it's trying to make it feel fleshy and real, and this is all done through coding. And it really just adds to the ability to create something that looks realistic in a short amount of time. Previously, this would have been, as I said, potentially weeks, if not months of coding, or it would just be someone literally using lattice deformations, not using a rig, in order to come up with the same look. So this is an AI image that we generated when we were along the process of coming up with this. We must have generated hundreds of different images in order to come up with the aliens. And it was really, really useful in terms of just coming up with the right emotion, the right look, the right feel. We would never be able to hit the project deadlines had we not actually used AI for look dev. It just really accelerated the whole process. And then AI in the final spot, as I said, this sequence, we used AI for the backgrounds. There's also the flash frame sequence as well, where the aliens, as they go through the black hole, so not the aliens, the astronauts in the spaceship, they go through the black hole and they go through the multiverse. There was about 30 to 40 different images that we created predominantly in artificial intelligence, layering it together, compositing it together in order to create those layers. We ended up creating hundreds that were then ultimately selected down to the few that were in the spot. The spot is I'd say 80% CGI and AI generated. Literally the only things are the live action astronauts. So the most of the spot has actually been created. And obviously the model, the asteroid. So final thoughts on AI. It's an incredible technology. It's turning the world upside down. Doesn't matter what industry you're in right now, whether it's architecture, healthcare, law, visual effects. It really is kind of changing everything. But we do believe that it's empowering artists and technologists and productions like never before. We think we're going to be seeing stories told that we have never been told before, just because the tools have just not been there. But the most important thing is that people are in control. and people with taste and skill and problem-solving abilities, are definitely the most important thing in the industry. And making good choices, the right storytelling choices, is something that we're realizing is more important than ever. Somebody was asking me earlier if I was going to give a student what should they focus on, and I would say focus on being generous, focus on understanding storytelling, focus on understanding narrative, focus on understanding photography, light, what makes an image look good, and those fundamentals. Those fundamentals can carry along across to a lot of different industries in a lot of different disciplines. So I think that was my conclusion. I raced through that. Apologies if I spoke too fast. But I'm happy to take any questions or any kind of comments anyone has. Yes.
So if you're working entirely on VMs,
Yes.
how are you finding the stability of those remote machines, and what are your workarounds when there are issues?
Well, so stability's, to touch wood, has been pretty good. Yes, touch wood, it's been pretty good. Our whole backend kind of server system runs on a platform called Weka, and our Weka nodes have been up and haven't been switched off and haven't been cycled out for 5 years. Yeah, 5-year uptime, which is pretty insane. But obviously we've got multiple Weka nodes where the data is aggregated across all of them. If we lose one, that's fine. If we lose two, it's okay. If we lose three, then things slow down a little bit. So there's redundancy that's built into the process. So the most important thing is that your data is secure, and I think that as long as you've got secure data, you can find ways of getting to it. So that's kind of almost like the heart of the whole system. In terms of the workstations and that, different workstation classes are always coming up. New graphics cards are always coming out, so people are always wanting the latest graphics card with more RAM or more CPU, more. But in terms of stability, it's been, touch wood, it's been really good for us. That hasn't been one of our issues. Yeah, a contention is probably the biggest issue we've got, where we're fighting for resources with a lot of the AI companies because they're using the same graphics cards that we want, and they've got more money than we have right now. So yeah, contention has been historically a problem, but it comes in waves. Yeah.
Because it's getting more common for people to give the advice like you just gave to students, to learn the fundamentals. I would imagine if I was a student, I'd be very confused because these are such deep disciplines, right? And to learn all those different things at once is a lot to ask, and it's almost debilitating to consider. So I'm curious what your thought is. How would you talk to a student about how to think about that?
I think it's focusing on whether you are narratively driven, whether you want to tell a story in terms of actually writing a story in that, or whether you're about the imagery, or whether you're about the look, and try and kind of focus on that the two halves to me are make the whole. So I agree with you that trying to approach all of it at once is daunting. So I think breaking it down into smaller components, like for me,
Thinking like a broad lane.
yeah, I think so. Broad, yeah, exactly. Like photography in design, I think could go well together. In terms of just understanding of light, understanding of design patterns, composition, shape. That to me is a really powerful area to focus on. Storytelling, another big, in terms of building a story, building structure, building narrative. That's another big area to focus on. So it depends where the person's interest really lies. But I guess my point is that up until probably a few years ago, if you were really specialized in visual effects, you would be highly in demand. Right now, it's the opposite. I think people need to be generalists in order to be highly in demand. Being able to look at, because there's so many different ways to solve problems now. There used to be just one way to solve it. So now you kind of need people that can look at something from multifacets and kind of go, oh, okay, well, I've tried this, that didn't work, but if I tried something else from a completely different, whether it be model or whether it be AI platform or whether it be software package, it's being lateral, really, I guess.
And I mean, we talk a lot about art, but we don't talk about the business.
Yeah.
The business has contracted so much that the rise of more of a generalist focus is much more aligned with how business model has devolved, and that is going to evolve, because as we started at the beginning of the industry, everyone had to be, while we were figuring out the industry, everyone had to be generalists, and then we all specialized into these big companies, and then now, but it's as much, I feel like people aren't teaching the business and why you should be a generalist, because the model supports that more. We need smaller teams that are a lot more versatile.
Yeah, I think looking at not just visual effects, but just looking at the advertising landscape, just looking at how the big agency models are changing. And up until 5 years ago, it was the big agencies were the ones that were doing all the kind of the groundbreaking work and what was coming up new. Now it's being small, it's being nimble, and so it's not just in our world. I think in general, I think there's a lot of move towards smaller, more nimble, more agile. Because I think I probably started around the same time as you, Ari, and it was like learning stuff. You had to learn Unix, and you had to learn how to code, and it was really tough. And then the building blocks on that, it took decades to understand what you were doing, which I don't think is discounted at the moment. I think that those foundations are still useful to us, but these days I think the barrier to entry is far lower, and people can be productive and people can contribute way sooner than it would have taken someone who was using TDI Explorer or kind of one of the first versions of Maya. It's I think the ability to do more has evolved as well. Yeah, and thank goodness for Blender. Like Blender, I think is just a phenomenal. The fact that Blender is free, it's just amazing. It's software is expensive, and really having to pay these yearly, because everyone's now on subscription. If you've got to subscribe, you've got to keep on paying your dues, otherwise you don't get the software. And it never used to be like that. So in a way, the software companies are kind of forcing people to look at open source. So we're basing a lot of what we do now. We're trying to is there a kind of open source alternative? Is there something that we contribute towards that can actually help the open source community as well?
With all the new approaches, it's quite experimental. Do you find there's a lot of successes on this project? Mm-hmm. Do you find you have failures and you're just like, no, that didn't work, we've got to step back, do it the old way?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the biggest things is they say in Silicon Valley, fail fast. It's okay to fail, but know that you're failing and then kind of pull the plug. If something's not working, then it's fine. As long as if you put a week into it and it's not working, it's fine. Just throw it away and use a different approach. But there's all the successes I've shown up here, there's 10 times as many things on this project that didn't work. And that falls by the wayside. And I think you become better at knowing what's going to work rather than trying to get something to work that worked once before. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I think you need to be pretty pragmatic in terms of approaching things these days. That often you go back and you do stuff by hand because you know it's going to work.
Yeah.
So you try stuff like our workflow is we try something with AI, see whether it works, see how far you can get. If you can't get there quickly, you're probably not going to get there. Because generally, if something's going to present itself, it's going to present itself really early on. And if you're bashing your head up against the wall trying to get something out of the AI, it's not getting it to you. You probably can't do it. You have to use a different model. different approach, maybe feed it into another AI, get it to give you the syntax so you can understand how to talk AI, which is a real thing these days, trying to understand how to prompt.
And it seems as well as a volume of stuff, so you're creating 100 images where you might have had one good one before, you've got 100 to choose from.
Exactly.
And just waiting. Does that change like daily structure and how you even talk about stuff?
It really does. We're honestly building the plane as we fly it. So with all these new technologies coming out, I think you have to constantly curate. You're constantly having to make real pointed decisions in terms of, we're not doing that, we're doing this. And you keep the worst thing is when you have too much choice and you leave all that choice on the table, then it's really difficult. So it's having the choice, making the decision, moving on. Having the choice, making the decision, moving on is a really important part of the process.
Yeah, so imagine if the client sees all the options.
Oh,
I'll decide in a few weeks.
absolutely. We show clients 2% of what we do because
Manager.
and literally because you want to make sure that and you've got to make sure that anything you show that you're happy to go with as well. One of the big mistakes I made early on in my career is showing the client something, and that obviously this doesn't work. I'm going to show it to them. And it's rubbish. None of them go for that. So then that's exactly what we want. I was like, oh. So it's a big lesson. It's like always show what you're comfortable going with.
You mentioned earlier about how models are, trained on particular data, right?
Yeah.
And so, based on the outcomes that you got from this project, do you foresee like training your own models
Absolutely.
to try to get specific looks, and
Totally.
therefore just dedicating like part of your force to like building out those models ahead of time?
I don't know if we're big enough to do that, but I think if I was a film studio or if I had kind of more intellectual property, I'd definitely be developing my own lore and my own kind of AI. And like, I don't know if anyone knows about Ben Affleck's new film, not new film, his new venture. Really interesting. It's kind of essentially feeding all of the rushes and all of the footage into an AI and training the AI on a film. So essentially, you have an AI model that's dedicated to this particular film, and therefore, if you want to reshoot a shot, if you want to reframe a camera, if you want to relight something, that film is being programmed into it. Now, I think that's going to happen more and more, especially as people get to grips with what's possible. I think one of the biggest issues right now is AI means different things to different people. So kind of everyone thinks it's something else, and it's coming to a consensus in terms of, it can be used for this, it can be used for that. And I think once there's a collective consensus in terms of, okay, if we spend $10 million kind of buying these servers and developing our own AI, that's actually money well spent, because that will save us $50 million of production costs. So I think that's going to change the way that the industry works and the way that shooting schedules are put together as well. Yes.
Working in like a cloud-based team at Preymaker has what sort of challenges have you run into as opposed to working in more traditional in-person settings?
Communication. That's the hardest thing. And also mentoring. I think communication, when someone's sitting next to you or someone's in the same room as you, you literally can turn to them, ask them a question, you straight away you get the answer. When everyone's remote, well, the thing is we're hybrid, so we do have a studio in New York that we encourage people to come into, but it's a tricky balance, kind of getting people to come into the office, because there's pros and cons to kind of working in person as working remote. Like I'm myself, I get a lot more done if I'm remote, but if I'm in the office, I kind of get a lot more out of the team. So it depends on what you're trying to do, and I think that nothing replaces in-person sessions with people in terms of mentoring. Like the growth, I've trained many artists throughout my career, and they've generally sat right next to me and been like an assist or somebody a junior. And that process of kind of a mentor and someone who is being mentored is very powerful, because you can learn a lot from other people. And that's probably the biggest thing that's missing now with largely remote work, is people are not benefiting from sitting next to someone that's got 40 years experience and hearing the conversations and understanding why did they choose option A over option B. So it's an evolved, meandering answer.
Related to your discussion of communication, people have discussed how people don't know how to talk to a bat or something. This, the evolution of these new tools, and you mentioned there's a whole new vocabulary, there's a whole new way of talking about what it is you want or what you can achieve. How does that work with clients? I mean, are they...
Tricky, because everyone's learning. I think there's no experts. Anyone that says they're an expert is probably not the expert. I think that's what I've realized, that with at the clients, they might use language that is completely different to what they're trying to say, but it's up to us to try and decode or decipher what they're saying. So in a way, communication has become more important than it was before, because I think the problem is everyone thinks it's becoming easy. And I think that is the problem. Like as soon as you start doing AI tests for a client, they show them 10. Oh, that's easy. Can I have another 10? Can I have another 10? And then before you know it, you've got this whole thing where you've got too many choices. And if people had spent more time communicating exactly what they were looking for, with in more the limited scope, I think the end result would have been better. So I think communication moving forward is going to become more important than it has been in the past, because things happen so quickly now as well, and there's no time for miscommunication.
I mean, a lot of larger organizations will have somebody who sort of sits between departments and is the communication channel between groups with different technical languages.
Yes.
And that seems like it would be another role that someone would need.
Yeah, I think we put the benefit of being small. Like we're 65 full-time people. We're a tiny little company, and I think as we become bigger, it's wanting to make sure that we don't lose this ability to, because there's a shorthand that we have in the organization, and that's very valuable and that's very kind of powerful. And as we become bigger, it's understanding how to communicate between different areas of the company, and that in itself is going to be an interesting challenge to figure out.
Well, it's working.
It's
working.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I'm curious. In like long form and film and TV, there's kind of more hesitancy around AI currently. Because there's a court case recently said that you couldn't copyright the output that came out of an AI, which is obviously problematic for IP. Do any of the clients in the commercial space, do they have concerns about that?
Massively. They're all super concerned. They want us to be completely liable for everything. They're like, well, we want you to use it, but we don't want to be liable for it. So we get these kind of contracts where like, we're not liable for anything. We're like, oh no, yes you are.
Right.
So our legal team is actually pretty good, where we push back on pretty much everything. Because people want the amazing power of AI, but they don't want to be kind of legally liable for it.
Right.
This is, again, something that people are figuring out. People are scared they're going to get a lawsuit. They're scared they're going to get taken to cleaners. So, understandably, a lot of AI is theft. So a lot of it is kind of understandable, and that's why it needs to be kind of used with consideration.
Yeah.
In that same vein, do you have customers that are coming to you saying, like, we don't want you to use any AI?
Yes. Mm-hmm. We've had a few projects recently where we're like, no AI can be used on this project. But then bizarrely, the same client a year ago, it's like, we want to use as much AI as we can. So it's a new world. I think this is so new for everybody, for the lawyers, for the people that own the content, for the licensing, and everyone's just figuring it out. But the genie's out the bottle. It's like, it's too powerful. It's too too versatile to put it back in the bottle again. It's not going to go back in. I think that the money men are going to figure out how everyone gets a little cut or paid or something like that. It's incredibly useful.
Do you have, I imagine your communication with clients and sort of steering almost always unrealistic expectations they have for AI. Like, I almost feel like I get scripts and then I bid out the films and it's just like the same thing. How are you going to use AI?
Yeah.
Not knowing how, how are you going to use it, and half. Like, how are you going to cut the budget in half?
Right.
Like, they have no idea. So I'm curious how you handle that when they give you something that's so off that you have to manage expectations and try to steer. Because even going back to what you said, the amount of iterations and the way you control your client is your margin. And so they may see, okay, we have all these options. But if you give them, one, if you give them too many options, but two, you're giving them the ability to take your time, to take your, it just seems like managing them has become such a, I will say, I'm meeting with the client and say, look, we're going to come up with things, we'll use it where it's relevant and where it makes sense, but we're just not using it. We're going to solve your problems, we're going to come up with engineer solutions, but let's not talk about it like it's something that's different. Another tool in the belt, it's appropriate it is. If not, please just, let's not go there. And most of the time they take that respectfully, but I'm curious with short form commercials where, they want to be in your mix because it sounds quick.
To an extent,
Yeah.
I think these days everyone's got multiple things on the boil. It used to be that we used to do one project and you had the client sitting with you in the suite, in the flame suite, eating sushi, making decisions, and kind of every single iteration, up, down, left, right. No one does that. No one can do that anymore because I think all of those people are on 4 or 5 different projects. So we're in a situation now where it's about gaining their trust, that you understand the brief, that you understand what you're looking for, creating something almost like a proof of concept or a North Star that essentially gets people on the same page, showing them that, kind of getting a little bit of rope, and then just letting you go a little bit, and then check-ins with a style frame here, a style frame there. And I found that the more you can impress a client up front, that you've got everything under control and you're going to nail this, the less they're going to micromanage you. The second they feel like you don't know what you're doing, then they're going to want to see all the iterations, they're going to see lots of options and things like that, and that's not a place you want to be.
So would you say it's more like business as usual, and then you try to pepper in, we're innovating here, we're trying out these things here, and you just sort of, you're almost not going there, you're doing things as you normally would, but you're not avoiding the topic.
Absolutely.
So you're not overcommitting. And
100%. We're basically, as you said, it's a tool in the tool belt. It's not the answer to everything. It's an additional tool. 10 years ago, I thought that Unreal was going to be the future of visual effects. I was focusing all my attention on Unreal. I was like 100% all in. It was really, really powerful, but it became another tool. It didn't solve everyone's problems. It kind of moved the problem somewhere else.
You quickly saw the limitations and steered them away.
Exactly. But we still use it. So we still use it for certain projects, and you know that it's good at this particular type of project. You use it for that, and I think AI is very similar.
Yeah.
Kind of as we become more adept in understanding what it's good at and what it's not good at, we're like, this is probably not good for AI. Let's just do another way.
When you say it's like, I've been using this often, it's like the exact same thing 10 years later. Obviously, there's a lot more breadth in AI than there was for volume shoots and Unreal, but it seemed like it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Everything was going to go this way. We're never going to do on-set things. We can control the weather. All these things are, these shoots are going to be worked out, and then 80% of that practicality practically went away. And it seems like AI's like this. You're just starting to see articles where people are going, oh, it's not going to be, even the LoRa's are not going to be dependable. The hallucination, the spatial knowledge, reference, it does not have. And there's not enough. It's interesting. I'm more interested in seeing how people find its limitations than what it can do at this point. Because there's so so much unrealism and so much fear that aren't sound.
Well, I think there's a lot of, it's a classic thing. People are fear what they don't fully understand or they don't know a lot of. I think the more you don't know something, the more you fear it. In my mind, as a kid, I was always afraid of the dark because I didn't know what was there. And so I think it's a little bit the same with AI. But the leaps in progress, though, I wouldn't discount. Like, AI is the worst it's ever going to be right now. Like, it's Moore's law used to be a thing back in the semiconductor kind of microchip days. We're kind of way outstripping that with AI right now. You know, things are getting 10 times faster. I'm making up numbers now, but things are getting 10 times faster in 18 months. You know, but it's I'm making that up, but it definitely is getting. It's exponential what's happening right now, and I don't know whether that's going to plateau out. But just seeing where we were a year ago, then 2 years ago, and then 3 years ago, it's remarkable how fast it's come. I think a lot of spatial awareness things like that are going to be solved in the next coming X. Because I don't think anyone could predict it. It's happening so quickly. And also, what's interesting is you got the kind of American firms that are kind of coming up. Google's leading the charge, like Gemini, and is doing like phenomenal. And what it's doing, Nano Banana 2, and everyone's using that, is absolutely phenomenal. And they just leapfrogged everybody. But then you've got all the Chinese models as well that have got way limited resources that are also doing incredible things. And it's like an arms race at the moment. So it's fascinating because when models come out, you just out of nowhere, you're like, where'd that come from? It's incredible. And this is going to keep on happening. I'm sure Google's still going to be left standing at the end of it all.
Have you seen
So earlier on you said that you encourage artists to kind of step outside their lane.
Yeah.
How is that process working? You know, tight deadlines, obviously, are super tight. Is that always possible, and does AI help?
It does. It's teamwork, really. It's kind of, you can't do too much as yourself. It's getting a team that's not too big, not too small. It's like the Goldilocks size, where you've got somebody that's probably good at animation and rigging, and they can take care of the one component. Someone else that's good at lighting. And so it's chopping it up, really. I think my comment about not staying in your lane is very much aimed at people that used to specialize heavily in one specific thing. Like right now, those jobs still exist, but there's fewer and fewer and fewer of them. And I'm always trying to prepare students or prepare people for what's coming, and that's what I'm seeing. And just in terms of in the industry, at Preymaker, what is useful? What are we looking for?
Are you seeing it much in the other disciplines on the shoe side and at the agencies, or are you kind of the AI people?
It's what's interesting is we've got some projects where the director says, "I'll shoot that," and then he goes, "Oh, I'll AI that," and that's interesting. Where you basically have him kind of knowing what he can direct physically and then what he can direct in AI. I haven't seen it completely be successful because, again, once it's generated in AI, everyone wants to change it. So, and directors are not used to version 50, version 60, version 70. So I can't see that model particularly grabbing hold. They might do the first iteration, something like this, and then hand it off to companies such as ourselves to actually refine it and go through the kind of the real nitty-gritty in terms of getting it to where it needs to be. But it is interesting kind of seeing different people trying to get into it, I think a lot of production companies are also seeing that shoot days are getting smaller, crews are getting smaller, and this is their way of evolving. But understanding how image manipulation and how tricky it is, the world of visual effects, compositing, CGI, animation, you kind of need to be able to do all those things in order to be able to, if something doesn't work, then you can do it the traditional visual effects way. Because you know exactly how to do it, you've got all the tools, you've got all the assets. So people might be lucky where they can come and get to a certain point. But I do think companies that are well versed in all of the disciplines are probably the ones that are best positioned to capitalize on what's happening in AI right now. Famous last words.
I've got another thing to sort of answer your question down in front about staying in your lane. Years ago I was working on a film, and I kept wanting to go out of my lane. I wanted to try this, I wanted to try that. And my supervisor said, do this, and it's due by Friday. And here, use this technique. I really want to innovate. And he's like, you know what, actually, do whatever you want, but it has to be done by end of day Friday. So go out of your lane, go out of the box, but just know that you have to know what you're doing enough so that we can fall back on the way that I told you to do it, so that it's done by your delivery. So that's sort of a theory you can use, a philosophy for going out of your lane. Always try to innovate, try to figure out different engineered solutions, but know what your deadline is and know when you've got to sort of cut bait and go back to your traditional way.
It's wise words. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, you've got a deadline, you've got to deliver. Yeah. Justin.
Hey, I'm just wondering like how kind of predicting costs with some of this stuff has changed, you know, with like VMs and stuff. I'm trying to calculate like, you know, if you have an actual machine with licenses, you can kind of forecast out, okay, for this team. Well, now you're dealing with, you know, machine hours on the VMs, and then you're also dealing with credits with all the models. So is that the thing that you kind of just say like, okay, it's just like R&D budget, or like how can you accurately or as close to accurately forecast some of these costs as they're just evolving?
So tracking it. We've been tracking all of our costs and all of how much we spend ever since we've opened up. So we've literally got detailed dashboards looking at how much do we spend on data, how much do we spend on moving data between regions, how much do we spend on rendering, how much do we spend on artist workstations, how much do we spend on, and literally it's capturing that data, trying to attach that data to the project, and then when projects come in, using that historical data in order to prepare for what's coming out. But it's not an exact science. Like we've had a few runaway trains that are very scary, where like, and that's the problem with AWS as well, is like you literally have access to as much compute as you want. And if something goes wrong or something just kind of goes off the rails, you start, your phone's vibrating on Sunday morning going, what's going on there? And that's $100,000 you just spend on a Friday, and that's scary when that happens. So you have to have guardrails in place that stop that from happening, and you need to be very frugal. I think that's the thing, is you can't assume that something's going to be good, that's going to work, or something that you did before. You've got to be on top of it, and I think that's something we've learned. It's definitely more scary being virtualized, because at least when you've got physical hardware, you know that you're not going to get runaway costs. So it's just building up the things around it to protect you.
You said you have teams in different time zones across the globe, right? So do they all work on the same project and kind of
try to? Yeah, we try and kind of, we're still figuring out the best way to do it, but we're trying to give people tasks that work well for the time zones, where somebody would model something that they handed off to the rigger, then handed off their animator, and by the time they're finished, they've got feedback, they can give it back to the modeler. You know, so, and that's great, because when that works, you essentially get your feedback at the end of LA time, just as Cape Town's coming online. And when you figure that out, that's amazing, because then you're essentially getting kind of rolling changes, and you're seeing updates every day. But you can also get it wrong. Like you get it the wrong way around, and then suddenly you're waiting an extra day because the person that was working on something is actually in the wrong time zone. So it's a blessing and a curse depending on what it is. But yes, we're working on the same projects all the time. The cool thing is we're not copying data around. We're essentially accessing a Preymaker cloud that is the closest to the person that is working, essentially. So it's all about kind of latency. It's all about what's your ping time to the actual VM that you're using, and then trying to understand the data between those sites. Like how are you going to manage that? Is it something that you You sync? Is it something that people just deal with the latency? There's many different ways to look at that. It's a whole discussion that I could have now.
So, what percentage of your workforce is distributed around the world, and what percentage is in, say, New York?
I'd say 50% is in New York.
Okay.
Yeah, 50% New York. I'd say 30%, additional 30% maybe in the States, and maybe 20% kind of London, Cape Town type thing. We try to concentrate as much of our expertise in New York as we can, just because this is where the clients are, this is where all the big brands are. It's like it does make sense having people close at hand. But if you've got an amazing talent that lives in Johannesburg, and that person you'll get and figure out how to work with them. So a lot of artists now are choosing not to live in big cities like New York because it's incredibly expensive. So it's trying to kind of work that work-life balance, constant evolution.
Do tax rebates affect commercial industry?
You don't get a single cent.
Nothing. Live action shoots, nothing.
Nothing. Not a single cent.
Well, you're lucky.
No.
I think it is one of the single most things that's destroyed the film industry.
Do you think so?
I believe so. I know everyone seems to be chasing them and are happy when their town gets more, but I just think it's but that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But it's miserable. You can't choose the artists that you need. You can't choose the proper vendors. You can't. You're forced. Your hand is forced. Your hamstring completely, and everyone's bought into it as if it's nutritious.
Yeah. No, funny enough,
sort of.
Luckily, I had a little bit of taste of long form at the previous place I was at, and it was I preferred the shorter, quicker turnaround, more focused.
Yeah, just being able to use the resources you're familiar with that you can depend on. And,
Thank you, Ron.